In this lesson, we will be looking at style and the definitions of terms that you need to know, many of which are reviewed from language skills, our poetry unit, and our short story unit. You will see that number 1 on your study guide, the term is universality, and that term was defined in the introduction notes that you took at the very beginning of the unit. So we will be starting with our second term, which is soliloquy. And a soliloquy is defined as a long speech in which a character, usually alone on stage, reveals his or her thoughts. And there are a lot of soliloquies in Romeo and Juliet. The second term is an aside, and an aside is a short remark in which a character reveals his or her thoughts to an audience. A pun is a play on words. Example in the play is grave man and sole, S-O-L-E, as in the soles of your feet, and soul, S-O-U-L, as in your inner soul. Our next term is metaphor, and it is a direct comparison between unrelated items. A simile is a comparison using like or as. And personification is giving human characteristics to something non-human. An example of a metaphor in the play is when Juliet says, "My lips, two blushing pilgrims." A simile is when Romeo says, "like a jewel in an Ethiop's ear." And personification, arise fair sun and kill the envious moon. Blank verse is unrhymed iambic pentameter. And a sonnet is a 14-line stanza poem. Elizabethan sonnets are in iambic pentameter and have a rhyme scheme of AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. One example, of course, being the prologue of the play. Three types of irony. Situational irony is when the unexpected happens. Verbal irony is a play on words. And dramatic irony is when the audience knows more than the characters do. Example of situational irony is when Romeo and Juliet fall in love even though their families are feuding. When Mercutio says, "Ask for me tomorrow and you shall find me a grave man," this is verbal irony because he is dying when he says it. And an example of dramatic irony is that we know that Romeo and Juliet are married, but most of the other characters do not. Dramatic literature is literature that is meant to be acted on stage. And a foil is not just something to bake with, but it is a secondary character who contrasts with a major character. An example of a foil is for Romeo is Mercutio. And these are your style notes for Romeo and Juliet.